I've been looking forward to our next interview all day long. I mean, this is simply an unprecedented opportunity to learn from one of the most successful engineers, producers, and artists in the business, Alan Parsons. Alan is a Grammy Award-winning producer-engineer, a musician, a songwriter, and early in his career, he worked with an astounding list of artists. I mean, how many people get to work with the Beatles? Then he scored a huge hit as an engineer on the best-selling album of all time, or one of the best-selling albums of all time, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. After years of success as a producer and engineer, Alan launched his own solo career with the Alan Parsons Project, and once again, he scored big with numerous hits. I've interviewed Alan a few times in the past, and he's also been here for GearFest, where he was a keynote speaker. We're thrilled to have him join us again at GearFest 2020. I hope you'll welcome Alan Parsons.
Hey,
good to see you, Alan.
Good to see you.
Everything good?
Everything's great, thanks.
Awesome.
Yep. Staying at home, not going anywhere, like a lot of people. But,
that's what we're all doing, right?
But I do have a studio at home, so I'm keeping busy.
Right, right. So we've got so much to talk about and so many things I want to cover with you, but let's jump back to the early years, because I know you've talked about it a lot, but people just love to hear about this. 18 years old, you're an assistant at Abbey Road Studios. How did that happen?
I had been working for the parent company, which was EMI Records, in a department known as tape records. This is before cassettes. I really am that old. It was a department that was making reel-to-reel plastic spools on a quarter-inch tape, putting out EMI's product. And I was involved with making copies of master tapes, maintaining the production machines. We could run off 24 copies in about the space of about 4 minutes, because it was everything was run at 4 times speed, both sides together. But that department, gave me access to a lot of great music, and of course I was one of the very first, because it was an allied department to Abbey Road. I was one of the first people to hear Sgt. Pepper when it was completed.
Nice, that's awesome.
That had a pretty profound effect on me. I said,
yeah.
I'd really like to see if I can get a job at Abbey Road. And I just was very lucky. I timed things right. The management at the time wanted to fire a couple of people, and I got the job. Soon after writing a letter, I was working there as a very much as a trainee. Mm-hmm. Starting in the tape library. That was the first thing that new recruits got to do, work in the tape library. But that was only about a month before I was down being a fly on the wall on sessions.
Right. And you had the, such enviable opportunity to be there at some incredible sessions. Tell us a little bit about your memories of Abbey Road and Let It Be.
Well, Let It Be was the first to happen, even though they were released in reverse order. That was actually nothing to do with Abbey Road Studios, except that I was sent down as a member of staff to help them out, and that was quite an intimidating experience, walking into the Apple basement studio, and there was all 4 Beatles, their wives, and Glyn Johns. It was intimidating, but amazing at the same time.
Yeah, it just had to be. It had to be absolutely amazing. So you also worked with the Hollies.
Did a lot of work with the Hollies. They were always such a great team of guys to work with. Always on time. Always respectful of the engineers, and always very generous. They brought me a very nice wristwatch for Christmas one year, I remember. So,
nice.
Very, very nice guys. Interesting. I was recently in touch with Bob Elliott, the drummer, and he's about to release a book called "It Ain't Heavy, It's My Story," which I thought was a great title.
Right. That's awesome. You worked later again with Paul McCartney and Wings.
Well, yes, as a result of working on the Abbey Road album, at least half the time they were there making it. Got to know Paul a bit better, and as I progressed from being an assistant engineer to a fully fledged balance engineer, as they were called at Abbey Road at the time. I was let loose with Paul on some of the sessions for Red Rose Speedway, and High 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 and Sea Moon, those singles. And I probably got to know Paul and Linda best on the Wildlife Wings Wildlife album, which I didn't engineer, but Tony Clark was another Abbey Road engineer who did engineer it, and I did a mix of one of the songs on Wings Wildlife. Paul said, "It's fine. We'll go with it." So that was my first real breakthrough, just getting a mix of Wings onto that first album.
Right.
Wings.
Right. Yeah, that had to be a huge pump up for your career to have that credit there for you.
It certainly did, and but it was really the opportunity to do Dark Side of the Moon. That's when it really also took off.
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk about that. Tell us how you were asked to do that album and kind of the process of putting that album together.
I had been commissioned to mix the previous album, Atom Heart Mother. I'd done all the sessions for that album as the assistant, and then the main engineer of Atom Heart Mother, Peter Bown, found himself double booked to do other sessions as well as mix Atom Heart Mother. So because I knew the material backwards, just like the band themselves did, they gave me a chance, and I mixed Atom Heart Mother, and I must have done an okay job because they then commissioned me a few months later to start work on Dark Side of the Moon.
Right.
I worked very hard to make sure that I didn't get double booked, to make sure that I did every single session.
Right.
Sometimes as a result of working all night, but it was well worth it. I didn't know I'd be talking about it 50 years later, but it was. It's not quite 50 years yet. It's probably about 45 years. But who could have known that it would have that kind of lasting power?
Right. Did you have an inkling that you were working on something that was really special when you were doing that album?
I think we all felt confident that it was Pink Floyd's best work to date, but I don't think anybody could have really anticipated the magnitude of the record over the years.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that stands out to me when I listen to your work from that era, Dark Side, Al Stewart's Year of the Cat, the Hollies, and some of these different bands, Wings, that you worked with, is that they're all radically different artists, and they have a very different sound, but there's a clarity to everything that you do there, and there's, I wouldn't say there's necessarily a signature to the sound, but there's definitely an approach there that sounds familiar as I compare those. Talk a little bit about how you approach doing a mix for those artists. Do you feel like you should do it the way you want to hear it, or are you trying to deliver something that they want, or how does that work?
I mean, as an engineer, you have to give the results that the producer is looking for. But I think I would always start by approaching it in such a way that I felt comfortable with it. But if the producer doesn't comment on the sound, then you can be fairly confident that you're doing an okay job. I mean, McCartney would always say, just as a matter of principle, make the drum sound better. So what is it that makes a drum sound better?
Right.
Very, very tough.
Right. So what do you do?
I'd say, okay, well, I'll try a different mic, I'll try a different EQ, or I'll change the balance a bit, and then eventually he'd say, yeah, that's fine, that works.
Right.
But some artists, some producers were just much more demanding than others. But Paul was always pretty demanding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On an album like Dark Side of the Moon and Year of the Cat as well, I mean, there's a lot of elements going on in those particular albums. How close were the tracks that you received to what we hear in the final mix? How much processing and work did you have to do at the mix stage to get the final result?
You know, I've always over the years looked upon mixing as being just a formality, you know, a process you have to go through. I always like to think that if you walked in to the final day of recording of any particular song by Al Stewart, by Pink Floyd, or whoever, the final mix would not be that far away from it. Mm-hmm. So I always strive to get everything that would be included in the mix basically recorded on the multitracks. So like I said, a formality rather than a. I mean, of course there is a creative element to mixing as well, but you know, it's not night and day. It's not in my work. The multitrack should represent what the final mix sounds like.
Right. So you're not inclined to, you finish tracking and now you take everything down to zero, you reset the board, and then you start from scratch and rebuild the mix from there. You are mixing as you go.
Well, not formally mixing. I mean, you're right. Yes, we would all faders to zero, go into mix mode. You know, start listening to bass, drums, the rhythm section together before you add the vocals, so on and so on. It was one trick that I learned from Jeff Emerick, the celebrated, sadly passed away quite recently, the Beatles engineer. He would start with everything except the bass and drums, get them balanced up, and then add in the bass and drums. So many other engineers that I've watched at work, they get the bass and drums happening first, then they start adding everything else. I've always done it in reverse.
So you take that same approach. You leave the bass and the drums till after the other elements are set.
Yeah, I just find it easier to balance relative levels between the other instruments first. I mean, of course, I will listen to the bass and drums as a separate entity as well, but probably after I've got the other balances going.
So do you start with the lead vocal then? Do you start with one of the instruments typically, or how do you build a mix?
I mean, if we assume that a given song contains bass, drums, a couple of guitars, maybe acoustic guitars, keyboards, so on and so on, I would balance up all the guitars and the keyboards, or any orchestral stuff, maybe backing vocals, and then I would add the lead vocal as the last. So I would essentially have a karaoke mix.
Right. So
before the final.
So the lead vocal comes on after the bass and the drums, or before the bass and the drums?
Oh, that would come on with everything.
Okay. Right. Interesting.
I'd have everything else balanced up before that.
So I found it interesting that.
Is that microphone, that 44BX?
This is my David Letterman microphone, right?
I didn't think so. We got the right crispness out of that.
It actually is a real microphone, but it's not what we're using today. We should be, right?
I can't see the mic. Are you wearing a lapel mic?
I've got a pair of lapel mics for redundancy. Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
They were great mics in their day, and you know, countless studios and broadcast facilities use those mics.
Right.
But they are ribbons, so tend to sound very, very dull against condensers and dynamics.
Right, it's a different kind of thing. But so many great vintage recordings were done with those. Have you used this microphone a lot? Is this something that you've had as a go-to for vocals or other types of instruments?
I haven't made a lot of use of it. There's another ribbon that I favor, which is the Coles 4038, and I love using those. I always have done. Another influence for Jeff Emerick. He used to use them as overheads on drums, and I've been using them as overheads on drums for years and years, and also on brass instruments. They sound great on brass instruments. Right, awesome. So I following Dark Side of the Moon, I
I understand that you had an opportunity to work on Wish You Were Here, turned that down to launch your solo career with the Alan Parsons project. Tell us about that decision and about starting that project.
It was a difficult decision. It was a very generous offer on Pink Floyd's part. But I'd already had a top 10 single as a producer in the UK. And I just said, no, I'm gonna go forward with my career as a producer and not be a staff engineer, as it were, for Pink Floyd.
Right.
So yeah, Wish You Were Here was not me. It was other guys.
Right, but clearly it worked out awesome for you. I mean, the Alan Parsons project and all your producing projects have done so well. Tell us a little bit about your approach to producing. When do you like to get involved in a project?
It's always interesting, you know, when you're working with a new artist, you have to discover whether the chemistry is going to work, and the only way to do that is to try it out. Try, you know, do a couple of songs with that artist, see if the chemistry is there. And usually I've done that just as an experiment before signing anything. You know, what's the use of signing up with somebody if you're clearly not going to work well together? So you know, there's a business side to look at with new artists. Established artists or artists that I've worked with already in the past, that's always easy. It's always because you know them, they know you. We have mutual respect for each other. You know, we know that it can continue to work, and it always did. I worked with essentially the same rhythm section throughout the project years, basically with the band known as Pilot. They were the basis of the rhythm section for all the project albums, particularly Ian Benson, the guitar player, who made such a great contribution to the project records.
Right, right. So when you're looking at either the project or the other bands you've put together, what is it that you look for in the musicians that you include in a project?
Obviously, virtuosity comes as a high priority.
Right.
They've got to play their instrument, but it's probably 20% musical ability and 80% communication skills. You know, how do we communicate with each other, and does it work? That's the most important thing of all.
Right, right. So I'm curious also, going back to producing, what is it that attracts you to an artist or a band and makes you want to produce them? I mean, if you hear something and say, you know, I'd really love to produce that project, what is it that would draw you in?
Usually a song or a series of songs, and just getting excited about what I could do with that song in the studio with that artist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's hard to define what I would say yes or no to any particular project that came up. But it's usually one song that I say I think that's a hit, and I would love to work on that song.
Right, right. You mentioned choosing projects with new artists and with established artists. Do you work differently as a producer in those two situations? Do you treat we'll call them a baby band, different than an established artist?
You have to respect the fact that a new artist may never have set foot in a studio before. So part of the process is to make them feel comfortable, make them understand how important headphone mixes are, and you know, not to work too loud, not to work too quiet, you know, all that kind of stuff. So with a new artist, it's you know, you're like a schoolmaster. You're introducing them to the world of recording. Established artists, you know, you don't need to do that. They know what they're doing. It's difficult sometimes if you're engineering something as opposed to producing. not to play the role of the engineer of the producer too much. I mean, is it the engineer's job to say that the one of the guitars is out of tune? No,
Right.
it's really the producer's job. But I was, I think, historically always ready to open my big mouth and say what I thought.
Right.
But the engineer's place is technically to fulfill the wishes of the artist or the producer, and otherwise keep his mouth shut. But I never did.
Right. As a producer yourself, when you work with, well, let me ask you this. Do you typically engineer and produce your projects, or do you work with a separate engineer?
In the digital age, I've been very reliant on an assistant, because I don't feel that I'm paid to click a mouse all day, and I have an amazing assistant engineer. His name is Noah Bruskin, and he's got the highest possible Pro Tools qualification, whatever that diploma is called. He had a great engineering education at a school in Los Angeles. But I'm pleased to be back in my studio. I've got a wonderful Neve analog, brand new Neve 5088 console, and I'm loving being back to pushing faders up and down.
Right.
Which for the last couple of albums, that experience went away. I did everything in the box, but I'm so happy to be back, with everything on its own fader and balancing up, and using Pro Tools for the automation. It's a great combination.
Mm-hmm.
It's just all the things that you used to use on fader automation, on flying faders and so on. It's just that aspect is I do in the box, but the basic balancing up, it's going through the analog chain and sounding great.
So how many outs do you bring into the console? Do you put things into stems, or are you bringing out individual tracks?
It's a 32-channel console. We've found that we can pretty much get everything on a song separated on those 32 channels. I've been mixing a live concert that we recorded in Utrecht in Holland last year for a video. It's also going to be a video release with quite well produced post-produced audio. So that's almost ready. Because through the virus crisis, I think people are hungry for live shows. They can't go to live shows, so we're going to give them one online.
Right, right. Is it different when you mix and, I guess we'll say, produce your music versus somebody else's music?
I've always strived to always be the same person. Of course, if I have my name on it, I'm more likely to be much more likely to be involved in the writing of the song, or the songs. I mean, all the songs on my most recent album, which is called The Secret, was a series of collaborations with essentially the band. All the band, co-wrote with me, and it's a great way of doing it. I've not done very much producing of other artists so much lately. I did do one single with a Austrian artist called Virginia Ernst. She's very talented, and I also did an album with Jake Shimabukuro, mm-hmm. who is the virtuoso ukulele player, who's one of the most incredible musicians I've ever worked with. He was absolutely amazing, and so humble, so friendly, so amazing to work with, and always giving me room to express my views and thoughts about arrangements and so on. It was great to work with.
Right. Well, that'd be a blast. So tell us a little bit more about the collaboration process when you're writing songs. Do you have the ideas for the songs and go to the musicians? Do they come to you? And how do you work on them together?
I have to say most of the songs on The Secret were originated by others. and then I get to make suggestions and maybe write a new section, a new bridge, or a new structure for the song, something like that. And that's how I worked with Eric Wolfson for the project, and he was hugely responsible for the bulk of the writing of the songs. But they will be very rudimentary, very basic demos that, or even just live performances that he would walk into the studio with, and then we would, expand it, change the structure, make arrangements with the band present, sometimes with the band not present. It's all just a process of weeding out the bad bits and refining the good bits.
Right. Which, having that combination of the songwriting skill and the producing skill, kind of that all works well to come to a final result. Then.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of music out there right now, and I feel that a lot of it would benefit from having the experienced ear of a producer. I think anybody can make a record on GarageBand, but to get real quality, I think having a producer makes all the difference.
Right. Well, that actually brings up a question. I'll ask this actually 3 different times, if you will. Not quite the same question each time, but what mistakes do you see when you're a producer looking at a recording that someone's done or a band? What mistakes do you see bands making commonly today?
It's a different world. The pop world, the top 10 world, is not something I particularly aspire to right now. I find a lot of music a lot of pop music is tending to sound the same, tending to use the same effects, the same kinds of beats and so on. I still think that my skills are in classic rock. They're based on the period I grew up with, and I'm still making records now the way I did back then, and that's not doing one track at a time, getting a drum loop, adding a bass, adding a guitar part. I like to get 4 or 5 musicians all playing together, all interacting with each other, and it's the way I've always done it. I think it's the way I always will do it. So just interaction is something I look for when I'm making records, and I think that sometimes that interaction is missing on modern pop music.
Mm-hmm. So part B of the question would be the same thing, but what about engineers? What mistakes do you commonly hear engineers make on recordings where you say, oh, if only they'd done that, it would be so much better?
I think there is a tendency to overuse auto-tune, and I've got a very sharp ear for overuse of auto-tune. I will use it sparingly if I feel like I can't hear it. Melodyne has changed the world. It's amazing what you can do with Melodyne, and I think just for correcting pitch mistakes, it's been wonderful. But like I said, a lot of records just heavily auto-tuned, and it just does not sound good.
Right. Do you think that's a producer mistake, or is that an engineer mistake?
Oh, it could be either. I mean, most engineers these days are producers anyway. It seems to be a dual role these days.
Right.
But I was one of the first to be a producer and engineer.
Right, absolutely.
My Alexa machine is talking to me for some reason. I must have said something that sounded like Alexa.
So say hello to her for us. That's
My
fine.
wife's just my wife's just unplugged her.
That's okay. It's okay. So let's go back to producing just a little bit again. You mentioned making new artists comfortable in the studio, and there's kind of two aspects of that. I would think, looking in it from the outside on your case, one is just making a new artist comfortable in the studio, period. But second of all, I would expect that for a lot of young artists, there's an intimidation factor coming into the studio with Alan Parsons. How do you deal with those two things?
Oh, I would hope people wouldn't be intimidated by me. I mean, I think I'm a fairly amenable character.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, a new artist walking into a studio for the first time, not having experienced being produced or being engineered, or literally the entire experience of recording in a serious studio. I think in this day and age, most young musicians have some kind of recording experience because it's so accessible. I mean, who hasn't recorded a song in GarageBand or some simple DAW with getting used to working with headphones and so on. But it is an intimidating experience if you've been signed to a label or you've been assigned a reasonable budget. You want to make sure that the money is well spent. And yes, intimidating, but I would try and as much as possible try and calm the waters and make them feel comfortable.
Right, right. So shifting back toward the gear side again, you mentioned that you have a Rupert Neve Designs 5088. What was it that led you to that console? Were you a Neve guy through your whole career, or did that console just come up?
I'd worked with Neve consoles countless times over the years. I've worked with everything. I mean, worked with SSL, worked with vintage Neve, modern Neves, but I just felt that a new Neve analog console with Rupert's latest design was everything that I wanted, and I've been so absolutely delighted with the results. Really good to get back to the analog feel of recording again.
Right. So have you taken that beyond?
Without doubt, the console sounds absolutely amazing. It really does.
Sure, absolutely. So have you taken that to the next step? Are you processing the sounds with plugins, or are you now using outboard hardware as well?
Some of the reverb plugins by Universal Audio and Waves have been a big part of what I do, but I route them through the console in the old-fashioned way. Just have them on sends on the console and returns on the console. You almost don't realize that it's a plugin.
Right.
Occasional plugin EQ, occasional plugin compression and limiting. Occasional delays, ADTs, and so on. I mean, it's so easy these days just to get if you wanted a delay effect, there it is. You just use a plugin. But I do prefer the old-fashioned traditional methods for echo and reverb to use the console sends. I mean, that's what the sends are there for on the console.
Sure. Have you been using the console just at the mixing stage, or are you also using it while you're tracking?
Oh, very much so. The whole process, right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. Which is why I said that I love to work with a band, a 4 or 5 piece band, and 32 channels is more than enough to make that happen.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Probably 10 mics on the drums leaves another 22 to put other instruments on. Plenty.
Right, right. Have you? I always enjoyed your surround mixes. I think I had a DTS disc of On Air, or one of the albums that you put out that just sounded phenomenal in 5.1. Are you still working in the surround medium, or do you prefer to work now in stereo, or what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, the live album I mentioned, we are mixing that in surround as well as stereo. It, it's very easy to do one than the other side by side. The balance differences between a stereo mix and a surround mix are almost negligible. So I usually start in surround, get the surround mix, then go to stereo, which is that's the money mix, not the it's the one that needs to be right. I'm very into surround. In fact, I won a Grammy this year for a re-released version of Eye in the Sky. My first ever Grammy win.
Nice.
I'd had, I think, 12 or 13 nominations, but this was the first win. So,
all right, congratulations.
Thank you. And we also put out another of the project albums in surround this year, Ammonia Avenue. So that's out there, and we'll submit that for another Grammy. I'm hopeful.
Right. Yeah. Best of luck with that. Look forward to it. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the favorite artists and projects that you've worked on through your past?
I mean, they all sort of contribute to some good memories. I mean, of course, how many people in the world get to work with the greatest rock and roll band of all time?
Right.
Just so fortunate, involved with the Beatles and Pink Floyd, of course. I'm very proud of the fact that here I am, over 40 years later, talking about a record that I worked on. The projects all full of really good memories and essentially a set of records that I've always felt proud of. I'm very lucky. I mean, a lot of producers have a 3 or 4 year lifespan. I've been doing this ever since I was 19, so I'm still loving it.
Right, it's awesome. It's awesome. Given that, we're getting close to the end of our time here together. I have 2 other questions for you that I always like to ask when I have someone who works on your level and who's worked with so many great artists, and that is, what makes a great artist?
I would have to say charisma. I mean, it's ability, of course, is hugely important as well. But all the talent shows used to use the expression star quality. And if somebody is a great singer but does not have star quality, he or she is going nowhere. You just got to have that charisma that makes people say, I like this artist and I'm going to buy this artist's music.
Right. So once again, given the fact that you are known as an artist producer and have done so much, an engineer producer, and you've done so much engineering as well, what is it that makes a great engineer?
Well, I think that's subjective. I think you would have to say that I would say that I appreciate one engineer's style. I don't appreciate another engineer's style so much. But engineers, again, have to be characters. They have to have the ability to communicate and speak the language of musicians and producers. That's half the job, really. Just communication skills, again, very important.
Right. And I guess we'll take it to its conclusion. What is it that makes a great producer?
Having the respect of the artist and vice versa. Mm-hmm. Having the producer must respect the artist, the artist must respect the producer. That's key.
Right. It's interesting that in all 3 of those, you didn't mention technical skills in really any of them.
It depends how you define technical skills, whether that translates to good sound. technical skill translates into good sound. You can have engineers that are extremely untechnical but have incredible ears. So, I grew up with engineers at Abbey Road that could not play a note on an instrument, but were amazing engineers.
Right.
It's a lot of parameters that go into making a good producer, a good engineer, and just like the parameters that go into making a great artist.
Sure, absolutely. Alan, thanks so much for sitting down with us today and taking time out of your schedule to share your experience and your wisdom with us. I mean, we're just so grateful to have you here at GearFest 2020.
It was great to be here, and I hope you can do an in-person or a live GearFest next year.
We do too, and hopefully we'll be able to get you back out here as well, because we'd love to have you come back here to Sweetwater.
I would love to. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Alan. Take care.
You're most welcome. Thank you.